The doors of the palace burst open before sunrise, and the guards froze at what they saw. Prince Kofi was running, barefoot, robes torn, eyes wild, dragging a trembling girl behind him toward the edge of the forbidden forest. The kingdom watched in horror as their beloved prince walked willingly into the trees, holding the hand of a girl who had never appeared in the village until a single full moon. Torches were lit. Guards were sent. Elders wept at the tree line, forbidden by ancient law to follow. By sunrise, only one of them returned. Who was she? Why did the prince abandon his throne for a girl no one could remember arriving? And why, when villagers begged the oldest elders to speak her name, did every one of them turn away in silence, as though saying it aloud might summon something back? Today, you will hear the forgotten African legend of the prince who fell in love with a poor village girl, only to discover she wasn't human. Stay until the end, because the final revelation changes everything you thought you knew. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Long before that morning of screams and torches, the kingdom lived in peace. It was ruled by a wise and aging king who loved his people, and it would one day be ruled by his only son, Prince Kofi. Kofi was young, kind-hearted, and restless in a way that made the palace elders uneasy. He had grown up surrounded by gold he never asked for, servants he never wanted, and a throne that felt, to him, more like a cage than a gift. He loved ordinary people. He loved their laughter, their arguments over goats and market prices, the smell of smoke rising from cooking fires at dusk. He dreamed, secretly, of a life where love came first and politics came never. So, disguised in the plain clothes of a traveler, the prince often slipped past the palace guards and wandered into the villages that surrounded his father's kingdom, unnoticed, unrecognized, and finally free. One such village sat at the edge of a vast, dark forest that the elders called the Forbidden Forest, a place no hunter dared enter after dusk. It was a peaceful farming community where everyone knew everyone's name, everyone's grandmother, everyone's secrets. Except for one girl. Her name was Amara. She lived alone in a small mud hut near the tree line, a modest home with a modest garden that somehow always bloomed brighter than anyone else's. No one could remember when she had arrived. She had no parents that anyone had met, no relatives who ever visited, no story of a childhood that matched anyone else's memory. And yet, strangely, the village had simply accepted her, the way people accept a season changing, without question, without alarm. Almost. Amara was beautiful in a quiet, unforced way, the kind of beauty that made people stop mid-sentence and forget what they were saying. She was gentle to a fault, always the first to carry water for the elderly, always the one children ran to when they scraped their knees. Old women blessed her in the streets. Children adored her. And yet, in all the years she had lived there, not a single soul had ever stepped inside her home. And every full moon, without exception, Amara vanished from the village entirely, only to reappear the next morning as though nothing had happened. The first time Prince Kofi saw her, he was disguised as a traveling merchant, sitting by the well pretending to inspect a broken cart wheel. Amara knelt beside him without being asked and helped him fix it, her hands steady, her laughter soft when the wheel finally clicked into place. "You're not from around here," she said, not looking up from her work. "What gave it away?" he asked, half smiling, half nervous. "Your hands," she said. "They've never carried anything heavier than a scroll." She glanced up at him then, and something in her gaze made his chest tighten in a way he had never felt before. "But you're trying. That counts for something." He did not tell her he was a prince. She did not ask. And that, more than anything, was what drew him back again and again. He kept returning, sometimes twice a week, sometimes every single day, always in disguise, always finding an excuse to be near her. They talked for hours beneath the mango trees. They laughed until their stomachs ached. They worked side by side in the fields, her hands guiding his through unfamiliar labor, his awkwardness making her giggle in a way that made his heart forget it belonged to a kingdom. "You're doing it wrong," Amara told him one afternoon, watching him struggle to balance a water pot on his shoulder. "You're fighting it. Let it rest, don't hold it." "Easy for you to say," he muttered, water sloshing down his arm. "You make everything look effortless." "Everything is effortless," she said. Once you stop pretending you have something to prove. He looked at her for a long moment after that, struck by how simple her words were and how deeply they landed. She taught him humility, how to carry water without spilling it, how to speak to elders with patience, how to sit with silence instead of rushing to fill it with noise. He taught her hope, that a life could be more than survival, that dreams were allowed even for people the world had quietly forgotten. Some evenings they said almost nothing at all, simply sitting shoulder to shoulder as the sun dropped behind the hills, and even the silence between them felt like a conversation neither wanted to end. Slowly, without either of them naming it, love began to grow, quiet and unstoppable, like a seed pushing through stone. But strange things followed her everywhere. Wherever Amara walked, wildflowers seemed to bloom a little brighter in her footsteps. Birds landed on her shoulders as if she were kin to them. Wild dogs that snarled at every stranger fell silent and still whenever she passed. And whenever Kofi gently asked about her family, about her childhood, about where she came from before the village, her smile would falter for just a moment, and she would change the subject so smoothly he almost didn't notice. Almost. The village healer, an old woman with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, began to notice things too. She noticed that Amara's garden never withered, even in drought. She noticed that Amara's footprints sometimes vanished from soft mud within minutes, as though the earth itself refused to hold her weight. One evening she caught the prince alone by the river and gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "You spend too many nights near that girl," she said, her voice low. "Ask yourself why no rain has ever touched her roof in all these years." "She's kind," Kofi answered, pulling his wrist free, more sharply than he intended. "That's all I need to know. Kindness and mystery are not enemies," the healer said. "But you'd be a fool not to wonder why they live in the same house." She whispered her concerns to the village priest, who had long refused to bless anything involving Amara's name. He would not explain why. He only warned, again and again, that some doors were not meant to be opened out of love, no matter how gently love knocked. "There are things older than kingdoms," he told Kofi once, refusing to meet his eyes. "Older than crowns. Older than every law your father has ever written." Some of them were kind faces. The prince heard these warnings and ignored every single one, because by then, love had made him blind, the kind of blindness that feels, from the inside, exactly like clarity. Then came the night that changed everything. Prince Kofi stood before his father, the king, and before the entire royal court, and declared with a steady voice and a pounding heart, "I will marry Amara." The throne room erupted into chaos. Advisors shouted over one another. The queen mother rose from her seat, her face pale with disbelief. A prince cannot marry a girl with no lineage, no family, no history, one elder cried, pounding his staff against the stone floor. "She is nobody," another shouted. "We know nothing of her blood, nothing of her people." "I know her heart," Kofi answered, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Is that not lineage enough?" The king rose slowly from his throne, his face a storm of disappointment and fear. "Kofi, you would trade a kingdom for a stranger." "I would trade a crown I never asked for," Kofi said, "for a love I never expected to find." The room fell into stunned murmurs, but Kofi did not waver. He had made his choice, and no amount of noise would shake it loose. It was in the middle of this uproar that an old storyteller, a wandering man who had not set foot in the palace in over 20 years, pushed through the crowd. His eyes found Amara's name on everyone's lips, and his face drained of all color. He staggered forward, gripping his walking staff, and whispered words that silenced the entire room. "She belongs to the forest spirits." No one believed him. They dismissed him as a madman chasing old superstitions. But the old man did not argue. He simply lowered his eyes and walked away, muttering that some truths reveal themselves whether people believe them or not. The wedding was set for the following dawn. But the night before, unable to shake the storyteller's warning from his chest, Prince Kofi secretly followed Amara when she slipped away from her hut under cover of darkness. He watched her walk, barefoot and silent, straight toward the edge of the forbidden forest, and, against every instinct of self-preservation, he followed her in. What he saw next changed everything he thought he understood about the woman he loved. If you're still watching up to now, type, "I'm still here," in the comment section. Deep within the forest, the trees seemed to part like curtains drawing open for a performance only Amara was meant to give. She stepped into a clearing bathed in moonlight, and Kofi, hidden behind a wall of thick roots, watched her body begin to change. Not into a monster. Not into anything grotesque or frightening in the way old stories usually warned. Instead, Amara transformed into something achingly beautiful, an ethereal figure wrapped in soft, glowing light, her feet no longer touching the earth, her hair drifting as though caught in a wind that touched nothing else around her. Ancient trees bent their branches low, bowing before her the way subjects bow before a queen. Animals emerged from the shadows and gathered at her feet. Deer, owls, foxes, creatures that should have feared each other, standing peacefully side by side in her presence. The prince's breath caught in his throat. Terror and awe fought for space inside his chest. A twig snapped beneath his foot, and Amara's glowing eyes turned instantly toward the darkness where he hid. "Kofi," she said, her voice both hers and something older, layered with echoes he couldn't explain. "You were not supposed to see this." He stepped out from the shadows, his hands trembling, his heart breaking and racing all at once. "Amara, what are you?" She lowered herself slowly until her feet touched the earth again, and the glow around her dimmed just enough for him to see the sorrow in her very human eyes. "I am exactly the woman who fixed your cartwheel," she said softly. "And I am also something you were never meant to fall in love with." She told him the truth then, every piece of it, her voice breaking as the words left her. Centuries ago, she explained, she had been cursed to live suspended between the human world and the spirit realm, forever caught in between, forever incomplete in both. She could walk among people. She could laugh and cry and love. But she could never remain fully human for long. Every full moon pulled her back into the forest, back into the world she had been bound to. And if she ever married a mortal man, if she ever tried to become fully human forever, ancient law demanded a terrible price. One of them, spirit or man, would have to disappear from existence completely, forever, with no trace left behind. "I cannot let that happen to you," she whispered, tears sliding down a face that flickered between glowing spirit and trembling girl. "You have to leave. Now, before the spirits realize you know." But Kofi did not move. He stood his ground, fists clenched, jaw tight with a determination that startled even her. "I don't care what the law demands," he said, his voice shaking but certain. "I have loved you since the day you fixed a wheel I didn't even need fixed. I am not leaving you in this forest. I choose you. I choose love, whatever it costs me." The ground beneath them began to tremble. The animals scattered. The wind rose into a low, mournful howl that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Amara grabbed his arm, her voice frantic for the first time since he had known her. "Kofi, please. Run. If you stay, they won't just judge me. They'll judge you too, and their judgment does not forgive." "Then let them judge me," he said, standing his ground even as the earth cracked faintly beneath his feet. "I'm not running from you. Not tonight. Not ever." The forest spirits were coming to enforce the ancient law, and there would be no mercy for a mortal who had trespassed into a truth he was never meant to witness. From the deepest shadows of the clearing, a figure emerged, tall, radiant, and unmistakably ancient. This was the Spirit Queen, the oldest and most powerful of the forest's guardians, her presence bending the very air around her. She looked at Kofi with eyes that had watched 1,000 human lifetimes rise and fall, and she spoke in a voice that shook the leaves overhead. "You dare defy the law of separation, mortal prince?" Kofi fell to his knees, not out of fear for himself, but in desperate plea for the woman he loved. "Please," he begged. "Whatever curse binds her, whatever price must be paid, let it fall on me instead. Take my crown. Take my kingdom. Just don't take her." "Kofi, no," Amara cried, rushing toward him, her glowing form flickering with panic. "You don't understand what you're offering." "I understand exactly what I'm offering," he said, not looking away from the Spirit Queen. "A crown means nothing to me without her standing beside me to share it." The Spirit Queen's expression did not soften, not yet. "Mortal hearts speak boldly in the dark," she said, circling him slowly. "Let us see if they speak the same in daylight, when the price has truly been paid." The Spirit Queen studied him for a long, silent moment, and then she turned toward Amara with an expression that softened, just slightly, at the edges. "He does not yet know the truth of what you are to his bloodline," she said. "Perhaps it is time he did." And then the Spirit Queen revealed a secret that not even Amara had fully understood. Amara had not been cursed because she was wicked, nor because the spirits had chosen to punish her out of cruelty. Centuries earlier, long before Kofi's grandfather's grandfather had ever sat upon the throne, the kingdom had faced complete destruction, a great famine, a war with a neighboring land, a darkness that had nearly wiped the royal bloodline from existence entirely. Amara, then a fully human woman with no connection to magic at all, had made a desperate bargain with the forest spirits to save the dying royal family. She had offered her own humanity, her own future, her own chance at an ordinary life, in exchange for the kingdom's survival. The spirits accepted her sacrifice, bound her between two worlds forever, and in return, the royal bloodline lived on, generation after generation, never knowing the price that had been quietly paid on their behalf. Prince Kofi's entire existence, his birth, his childhood, his crown, his very right to stand in that forest and beg for the woman he loved, existed only because of a sacrifice Amara had made long before he was ever born. The woman he had fallen in love with over broken cartwheels and quiet laughter beneath mango trees had been secretly protecting his family for centuries, asking nothing in return, expecting no memory of her name to survive. Kofi felt the weight of the revelation crash over him like a wave. He looked at Amara with new eyes, understanding now why the elders feared her, why the priest refused to speak her name, why the very forest itself seemed to answer to her presence. "You saved my family," he whispered, his voice breaking. "My entire kingdom exists because of you. And no one ever knew. No one ever thanked you." Amara said nothing. She simply looked at him, centuries of quiet loneliness written across her glowing face. The Spirit Queen raised a hand, and the forest fell utterly silent, waiting. "The law remains," she declared. "One path leads to eternity as a guardian of this realm, bound forever to protect what you once saved. The other leads to a single mortal lifetime, fragile and short, but entirely your own to live as you choose." She turned her ancient eyes toward Amara. "Choose now. Immortality or humanity?" The forest held its breath. Kofi held his. And Amara, after centuries of sacrifice made in silence, finally chose herself. She chose humanity. The moment the words left her lips, the glowing light around her began to fade, gently, like a candle finally allowed to rest. The forest spirits released their hold on her, one by one, the ancient trees straightening from their bough, the animals slipping quietly back into the shadows from which they came. The Spirit Queen watched with something almost like pride flickering behind her ancient eyes, and then she, too, dissolved into the darkness of the trees, leaving only silence behind. But magic, once released, does not return. By morning, the forest had lost its guardian forever. The flowers in Amara's garden bloomed no brighter than any other garden in the village. The animals no longer gathered at her feet. She was, for the first time in centuries, simply a woman. And Kofi, true to the choice he had made kneeling in that clearing, gave up his crown. He stood before his father the following week and renounced his claim to the throne, choosing love over the golden cage he had never wanted in the first place. The royal court was furious. The elders shook their heads. But Kofi had never once looked back. Together, Kofi and Amara left the palace behind entirely and built a simple life among the villagers who had once whispered about the girl with no history. They were not royalty anymore. They were not spirits, nor guardians, nor legends whispered around fires late at night. They were simply two ordinary people who had finally, after everything, earned the right to an ordinary future, a small home, a modest garden, mornings spent fixing cartwheels that didn't really need fixing, and evenings spent laughing beneath the same mango trees where it had all begun. "Do you regret it?" Amara asked him one evening, watching the sun sink low over the fields, her hands finally just hands, warm and ordinary in his. "Regret what?" he asked. "Choosing a lifetime with you over a crown that was never really mine to keep. The crown, the kingdom, everything you gave up." Kofi shook his head slowly, pulling her closer. "I didn't give anything up," he said. "I finally chose what was actually worth keeping." She laughed then, a soft, unguarded sound, and for the first time in centuries, it belonged entirely to her. Not to a curse, not to a bargain, not to a debt owed by strangers who would never know her name. Just to her, and to the man beside her, and to the ordinary life they had both fought so hard to earn. In time, the truth of Amara's sacrifice spread quietly through the village, then through the kingdom, until every household knew the story of the woman who had protected the royal bloodline from the shadows for centuries, asking for nothing in return. And every year, on the anniversary of that final night in the Forbidden Forest, the villagers gathered to celebrate her, not as a spirit, not as a myth, but as the ordinary woman who had once given up everything for people who never even knew her name. Sometimes the greatest love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about choosing someone whose sacrifices the world never noticed. Would you have chosen love or the throne? Do you believe true love can overcome destiny? Was Amara right to give up immortality after everything she had already given? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, subscribe for more timeless African folktales filled with mystery, wisdom, and unforgettable twists. And don't miss our next story, where a fisherman rescues an old woman from the river, only to discover she is the forgotten queen of the waters.